The expanse was a vast, desolate region of space littered with drifting asteroids and abandoned stations. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, and everyone had something to hide. For the raiders aboard their sleek scavenger vessel Dread Talon, it was the perfect hunting ground. Captain stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the sensor readings as they drifted closer to an unmarked freighter. The ship appeared derelict at first glance, its power signature flickering faintly, but something about it didn't sit right with him. Why would a human freighter be out here alone? He muttered under his breath. Humans weren't known for venturing into such dangerous territory unless they were desperate or hiding something. "Orders, Captain," asked the helmsman, his fingers hovering over the controls. Lips curled into a predatory grin. "Boarding party, now." Minutes later, a team of clad and armored suits breached the freighter's airlock. Their scanners detected minimal life signs, just two, in fact, and they moved cautiously through the dim corridors. The interior of the ship was eerily quiet, the hum of its failing systems their only companion. Finally, they reached the main cargo hold. Inside, they found what they least expected: a single human male sitting cross-legged on the floor, cradling something small and furry against his chest. He looked up calmly as the raiders entered, his piercing blue eyes meeting theirs without a trace of fear. His dark hair was unkempt, and his clothes were worn, but there was an undeniable strength in his posture. Beside him lay scattered supplies, a few ration packs, tools, and a battered plasma cutter, but nothing valuable enough to justify risking this part of space. "What is your name, human?" growled the leader of the boarding party, stepping forward with his weapon raised. The man didn't flinch. "Leo," he said simply, his voice steady despite the odds stacked against him. Narrowed his eyes. "And what do you think you're doing out here, Leo?" Leo glanced down at the creature nestled in his arms before answering. "Surviving." It wasn't until gestured for one of his men to grab the object that Leo tightened his grip protectively. That's when the raiders realized what it was: a cub. Not just any cub, an apex predator, its silvery fur shimmering even in the low light. Its large, luminous eyes blinked slowly, almost lazily, as if it were completely unaware of the danger surrounding it. They exchanged stunned glances. Apex predators were legendary across the galaxy, revered and feared in equal measure. They were intelligent, fiercely loyal, and capable of tearing apart entire armies if provoked. But most importantly, their biology held secrets that could revolutionize genetic engineering. Entire species had gone extinct trying to harness their power. "You stole this from us," accused, pointing his rifle at Leo's head. "This cub belongs to the Empire." Leo shook his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "No, you stole it first." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. This human didn't behave like the others they'd encountered, weak, pleading, or terrified. There was something different about him, something dangerous lurking beneath his calm exterior. "Take them both," ordered finally, lowering his weapon. "Alive." Back aboard the Dread Talon, Leo sat silently in a holding cell, the cub still clutched tightly in his arms. Despite the restraints binding his wrists, he showed no sign of resistance. Around him, the crew buzzed with excitement, already imagining the rewards awaiting them back home. Capturing an apex cub was no small feat. It would bring them fame, wealth, and possibly even promotions within the Empire. But not everyone shared their enthusiasm. Commander, a grizzled veteran with scars etched deep into his face, watched the scene unfold with growing unease. He had spent decades battling humans during the Great Expansion Wars and knew better than anyone how cunning they could be. Something about this particular human bothered him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "He hasn't said a word since we brought him aboard," reported, joining on the observation deck overlooking the cell. "Just sits there staring at the cub like it's his own child." Stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Humans are sentimental fools. Perhaps he thinks we'll spare him if he pretends to care." Or maybe he really does care, suggested, shrugging. Either way, it doesn't matter. We've got what we came for. Frowned, his instincts screaming that things weren't adding up. Why would a lone human risk traveling so far into hostile territory just to save a cub? And why hadn't he fought back when confronted? It all seemed too convenient, too calculated. Keep an eye on him, instructed after a long pause. If he tries anything, even breathing wrong, I want to know immediately. As the hours passed, the cub grew increasingly restless, squirming in Leo's arms and occasionally letting out soft, plaintive whistles. The sound grated on the nerves of the nearby guards, who began packing anxiously outside the cell. One of them, frustrated by the noise, banged his fist against the energy barrier separating them. "Shut that thing up," he snapped. Leo ignored him, continuing to stroke the cub's fur soothingly. His touch seemed to calm the creature, but only temporarily. Eventually, it let out a high-pitched chirp that echoed through the corridor, causing several to wince. "This isn't going to work," muttered another guard, shaking his head. "We need to get it sedated before it drives us all mad." Agreed. Summoning the ship's chief scientist, doctor, he ordered her to prepare a tranquilizer dart. "Just enough to knock it out," he added sternly. "I don't want it dying on us." Doctor nodded and hurried away, returning moments later with a loaded injector. She approached the cell cautiously, aiming the device at the cub. Leo tensed visibly but made no move to stop her. As the dart struck home, the cub whimpered softly before slumping limply in Leo's arms. For the first time since being captured, Leo spoke. "You have no idea what you've done." His tone sent a chill down spine. Ignoring the warning, however, the commander dismissed the incident as mere bravado. After all, what harm could a single human possibly pose? What none of them realized was that Leo wasn't acting alone. Hidden deep within the folds of the cub's fur was a tiny micro-beacon, one designed to send a distress signal detectable only by those who knew how to listen. And somewhere far away, someone was already responding. Their victory was about to become their undoing. The dread Talon hummed quietly as it continued its journey through the expanse, carrying its prized captives toward the orbital station known as Small. Inside the ship's holding cell, Leo sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the unconscious apex cub cradled in his arms. The tranquilizer had done its job, leaving the creature limp and unresponsive. But Leo knew better than to believe this was the end of the story. Apex predators were resilient, born survivors, and as Leo called him, would wake soon enough. Outside the cell, Commander paced back and forth, his mind racing with questions. What was a lone human doing with an apex cub? How had he managed to steal it from one of the Empire's most secure breeding facilities? And why hadn't the man cracked under pressure yet? Most humans broke within hours of capture, spilling their secrets like water over a dam. But Leo remained silent, his calm demeanor unnerving even the seasoned commander. "Bring me doctor," barked at a nearby guard. Moments later, the scientist entered, clutching a filled with preliminary scans of both the human and the cub. "Commander," she greeted him nervously, bowing her head slightly. "I've analyzed the cub's physiology. Its genetic markers are consistent with those of a purebred apex predator. However," she hesitated, glancing at Leo through the energy barrier. "However what?" demanded, his patience wearing thin. "Its hormone levels suggest it has formed a bond with the human, a very strong bond." Frowned. "Impossible. Apex predators don't form bonds with lesser species. They view them as prey or enemies." Doctor swallowed hard but pressed on. "That may be true for adults, but cubs are different. They imprint easily during early development. If this human raised the cub from infancy, it's possible they share a connection we can't fully understand." Turned his attention back to Leo, studying him carefully. The human didn't flinch under his scrutiny, his expression unreadable. There was something almost protective about the way he held the cub. It made uneasy. Humans weren't supposed to care so deeply, not for animals, not for anything outside their own survival. We'll see how long that bond lasts when we start cutting into it, muttered darkly before turning to leave. Prepare the interrogation chamber. I want answers. Hours later, Leo found himself strapped to a cold metal chair in the heart of Smaw, the massive orbital station looming ominously against the backdrop of space. The room was stark and sterile, lit by harsh white lights that reflected off the polished surfaces. Wires and electrodes snaked around him, connecting him to machines designed to measure stress levels, brain activity, and pain thresholds. Standing opposite him was Commander, flanked by two burly guards armed with stun batons. "Let's try this again," began, leaning forward slightly. "Where did you get the cub?" Leo stared straight ahead, refusing to meet the commander's gaze. His silence only fueled frustration. "I'm not asking nicely this time," growled, nodding to one of the technicians operating the equipment. A low hum filled the air as the first wave of pain-inducing current coursed through Leo's body. His muscles tensed involuntarily, but he bit down on his lip to keep from crying out. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but still, he said nothing. "You're wasting your time," snapped at the technician after several minutes of fruitless effort. He stepped closer to Leo, gripping the edge of the chair with both hands. "Listen to me, human. You think you're protecting something, some secret. Trust me, you're not. We already know everything there is to know about apex biology. All you're doing is delaying the inevitable." Leo finally spoke, his voice hoarse but steady. "You don't know anything." His eyes narrowed. "Oh, enlighten me then. What exactly am I missing?" Leo took a deep breath, meeting his gaze for the first time. "You took something that doesn't belong to you, something sacred, and now you'll pay the price." Scoffed, straightening up. "Sacred? Don't make me laugh. Apex predators are weapons, nothing more. They exist to serve those strong enough to control them." "They aren't yours to control," Leo shot back, his tone sharp. "And neither am I." Furious, signaled for another round of electrical shocks. This time, the current was stronger, causing Leo's entire body to convulse violently. Yet despite the agony, he refused to break. His resolve was unshakable, his focus unwavering. Meanwhile, in a nearby laboratory, Doctor worked tirelessly to extract blood samples from the still sedated apex cub. Her hands trembled slightly as she inserted the needle into the creature's vein, drawing out a small vial of shimmering silver liquid. As she examined the sample under a microscope, her brow furrowed in confusion. The cub's cellular structure was unlike anything she'd ever seen, more advanced, more intricate, as if it had been engineered rather than evolved naturally. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself, flipping through pages of data on her screen. "It shouldn't be able to survive these conditions." Before she could delve deeper, however, the lab doors slid open, revealing a group of armed soldiers. Doctor barked. "What's taking so long? We need results now." I'm trying," she stammered, clutching the vial tightly. "But the cub's biology is complicated. I need more time." Glared at her, clearly unimpressed. "Time is a luxury we don't have. Commander wants answers today." As they argued, a sudden commotion erupted from the containment area where the cub was being held. Alarms blared, red lights flashing throughout the corridor. Both and Doctor rushed to investigate, finding chaos unfolding inside the lab. The cub, having awakened prematurely, had broken free of its restraints and was wreaking havoc. Its claws slashed through consoles, sending sparks flying, while its piercing shrieks echoed deafeningly through the room. Two technicians lay unconscious on the floor, their uniforms torn and bloodied. One of the soldiers fired a tranquilizer dart, but the cub dodged it effortlessly, leaping onto a nearby workstation and knocking over a tray of equipment. Panic spread among the staff as they scrambled to contain the situation, but the creature moved too quickly, too unpredictably. "Stand down," shouted, raising his weapon. "We can't risk damaging it." But the cub wasn't listening. It seemed driven by instinct alone, lashing out at anyone who came near. Finally, after several tense minutes, it spotted Doctor holding the vial of its blood. With a snarl, it lunged at her, forcing her to drop the precious sample. The vial shattered on impact, spilling its contents across the floor. "No," Doctor cried, sinking to her knees in despair. "That was our only chance." Cursed under his breath, signaling for reinforcements. By the time they managed to subdue the cub using a combination of sedatives and force fields, the damage had been done. Equipment was destroyed, valuable data lost, and morale among the crew plummeted. Back in the interrogation chamber, Leo watched the events unfold via a surveillance feed displayed on a nearby monitor. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth as he murmured softly, "They never learn." Noticed the change in his demeanor and followed his gaze to the screen. Realization dawned on his face as he pieced together what had happened. "That thing caused all this?" he asked incredulously. Leo nodded slowly. "Doesn't trust strangers, especially ones who hurt him." "And you think that makes you special?" sneered. "Because you can control it." "I don't control him," Leo corrected. "He trusts me. There's a difference." Clenched his fists, anger boiling beneath the surface. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Could this human truly be more than he appeared? Was he bluffing about the consequences of their actions, or was there truth to his warnings? To either of them, the beacon hidden in Sphere had already transmitted its signal across light years of empty space. Somewhere far beyond the reach of the Empire, a response was already. On the icy moon of Erebus 9, nestled beneath layers of frozen terrain and shielded by ancient glaciers, lay a hidden command center. It was a place few outsiders knew existed, a sanctuary built not for conquest but for survival. Here, humanity's most resourceful individuals gathered, united by a shared purpose, to protect their own. They called themselves the Wardens, though no official records acknowledged their existence. To the rest of the galaxy, they were ghosts, rumors whispered in shadowy corners. But to those who mattered, they were family. Commander Briggs sat at the heart of this operation, her sharp green eyes scanning rows of monitors displaying feeds from across the galaxy. She was a woman in her early 40s, with short auburn hair streaked with gray and a demeanor that commanded respect without effort. Her uniform bore no insignia, just patches stitched with the names of those she'd lost along the way. Each name served as both a reminder and a promise to never leave another behind. The room around her buzzed with quiet activity. Engineers monitored communications arrays, pilots ran diagnostics on their ships, and medics prepared supplies for potential rescue missions. Everyone had a role, and everyone understood the stakes. In this part of the universe, being human meant living on borrowed time. Without allies, without strength in numbers, survival was impossible. It was during one of these routine checks that the signal came through. A faint pulse, barely detectable, transmitted from deep within the expanse. Froze, her fingers hovering over the console as the data scrolled across the screen. The source code matched a pattern she hadn't seen in years, one reserved exclusively for emergencies involving apex predators. Called out, the communications officer, her voice tinged with urgency. "You're going to want to see this." Stood and moved quickly to station, leaning over her shoulder to examine the readout. "Is it real?" she asked, her tone measured but tense. "It's real," confirmed, nodding, "and it's Leo's beacon." For a moment, the weight of the revelation hung heavy in the air. Leo was one of their best, calm under pressure, skilled in combat and fiercely loyal. If he'd activated his beacon, it meant only one thing: he was in trouble. And if the signal also indicated the presence of an apex cub, then the situation was far worse than anyone could have anticipated. Without hesitation, tapped her comm link, broadcasting to every corner of the base. "All units report to the assembly hall. Code Ember. Leo's been taken, and he's got." The words rippled through the facility like a shockwave. Within minutes, hundreds of people poured into the assembly hall, their faces grim but determined. Some wore battered flight suits, others carried tools or medical kits, but all shared the same resolve. They were ready to move, ready to fight, ready to do whatever it took to bring one of their own home. Standing before them, raised a hand to silence the murmurs. "We don't have much time," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Leo's signal places him aboard a orbital station called Small. He's with an apex cub, and based on the intel we've gathered, they are trying to extract information from both of them. We know what happens next if we don't act fast." A murmur of anger spread through the crowd. Everyone present understood the stakes. They were notorious for their cruelty, especially when it came to experiments involving apex biology. If they succeeded in harvesting's genetic material, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for the cub, but for the entire ecosystem of the galaxy. "We'll hit them hard and fast," continued, packing slowly as she outlined the plan. 300 ships will deploy simultaneously, using stealth protocols to avoid detection until we're in position. Once we arrive, we'll disable their weapons systems and breach the station from multiple entry points. Our priority is extraction, not destruction. Get in, grab Leo, and get out. No heroics. No unnecessary risks. Understood? Heads nodded in unison, the determination in their eyes unwavering. These weren't soldiers bound by rank or regulation. They were volunteers driven by love and loyalty. For many, Leo wasn't just a comrade. He was a friend, a mentor, a brother. And wasn't just a cub, he represented hope, a symbol of the bond between humans and apex predators that had endured despite centuries of conflict. As the meeting dispersed, teams sprang into action. Pilots climbed into cockpits, running final checks on engines and navigation systems. Engineers reinforced hulls and calibrated weapons, ensuring each vessel was battle-ready. Medics packed field kits with supplies, while strategists updated tactical maps with real-time data. Every detail mattered, every second counted. Among the flurry of activity, found herself standing beside an old star chart pinned to the wall. Her gaze lingered on the marker indicating the location of Small. It was a formidable target, heavily fortified and guarded by elite forces, but didn't feel fear, only resolve. She thought about Leo, about the countless times he'd risked his life for others, about whose trust in humanity was a gift worth protecting at any cost. Behind her, footsteps echoed softly against the metal floor. Turning, she saw a veteran pilot with decades of experience navigating hostile territories. His face was lined with age, but his eyes still burned with intensity. "Ready when you are, Commander," he said simply. Nodded, offering him a small smile. "Thank you for everything." "No thanks needed," he replied, shrugging. "We're family, that's what we do." Minutes later, the fleet assembled outside the moon's atmosphere, a patchwork armada of retrofitted freighters, sleek interceptors, and rugged transport vessels. Their hulls bore scars from past battles, painted black with crimson wolves emblazoned on their sides, a symbol of unity and defiance. As one, the ships powered up their engines and vanished into fold space, leaving behind only silence. The journey to the expanse took hours, but aboard each vessel the tension was palpable. Crews reviewed plans, rehearsed contingencies, and prepared for the unknown. In the lead ship, the Iron Dawn stood on the bridge, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Beside her, piloted the vessel with practiced ease, his focus absolute. "ETA 5 minutes," he announced, glancing at the countdown timer on his console. Exhaled slowly, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She thought about Leo again, picturing his calm expression and steady gaze. Whatever horrors he was enduring, she knew he wouldn't give up, not while depended on him. And now it was their turn to show the same courage. As the fleet emerged from fold space, the sight of Small loomed large against the void. The station was massive, its spires reaching outward like the claws of some great beast. Sensors immediately detected defensive turrets swiveling to track the incoming ships, but before alarms could sound, the wardens executed their first move. Every ship in the fleet powered up its external lights, flooding the station's sensors with blinding brightness. The effect was instantaneous. The station's systems overloaded, rendering its defenses temporarily useless. Simultaneously, boarding pods launched from the fleet, hurtling toward the station's outer hull with precision born of practice and desperation. Inside the pods, teams of wardens braced themselves for impact. Among them was Rachel, a young engineer armed with nothing more than a plasma cutter and sheer determination. Next to her sat Daniel, a medic clutching a satchel filled with medical supplies. Both were newcomers to the group, but neither flinched as the pod breached the hull with a deafening clang. The instant the hatch opened, chaos erupted. Guards scrambled to respond, their movements sluggish due to the sensor overload. The wardens moved swiftly, neutralizing threats with efficiency honed by years of training. They weren't here to kill, they were here to save. Every corridor cleared, every door breached, brought them closer to their goal. Back in the holding cell where Leo awaited rescue, the sounds of battle reached his ears. Explosions rattled the walls and distant shouts echoed through the corridors. For the first time since his capture, a flicker of hope ignited within him. He glanced down at, who stirred slightly in his arms, as if sensing the change in the air. "They're coming," Leo whispered, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "Hold on, buddy, just a little longer." Outside the cell, the tide of the battle turned decisively in favor of the wardens. Reinforcements poured in, overwhelming the remaining forces. One by one, barriers fell, pathways cleared, until finally a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. "Leo," said, her voice cracking with relief as she stepped forward. In her hand, she held a cutting tool, which she used to slice through the energy barrier separating them. Leo looked up, his face breaking into a weary smile. "Took you long enough," he joked weakly, though his eyes betrayed the depth of his gratitude. Knelt beside him, quickly severing the restraints binding his wrists. "You reckless idiot," she muttered, helping him to his feet. "What were you thinking, stealing an apex cub from a breeding facility?" Leo shrugged, wincing slightly as blood flow returned to his numb hands. Someone had to. Stirred again, letting out a soft chirp as he caught sight of. Tentatively, he reached out a paw, brushing against her gloved hand. Smiled softly, stroking the cub's fur gently. "Hey there, little guy, you gave us quite the scare." As they prepared to leave, Leo paused, glancing back at the empty cell. "They'll pay for what they've done," he said quietly, his tone darkening. "But not today. Today we go home." With that, the trio joined the retreat, disappearing into the chaos of the station as the wardens completed their mission. Behind them, Small remained intact, but humiliated, exposed, and terrified. News of the attack would spread quickly, carrying a message loud and clear. Mess with one human and you answer to 300, and they always come. The battle inside Small raged like a storm, chaotic and deafening. Explosions echoed through the corridors, sending shockwaves rippling across the station's metallic walls. Sparks flew from damaged consoles as wardens moved with precision, their boots clanging against the floor in unison. They weren't here to destroy, they were here to reclaim what was theirs. Leo followed closely behind, his legs still shaky from days of captivity, but his determination unwavering. Trotted beside him, his small body radiating energy despite the sedatives that had only recently worn off. The cub seemed to understand the urgency of the situation, staying close to Leo's side as they navigated the chaos. "Stay sharp," called over her shoulder, her voice cutting through the noise. "We're not out yet." Ahead of them, a group of guards appeared, weapons drawn. Without hesitation, the wardens raised their own rifles, firing quick bursts that sent the guards retreating further into the station. These skirmishes were brief but intense, each one bringing them closer to freedom. As they advanced, Leo couldn't help but notice the expressions on the faces of the wardens. There was no fear in their eyes, only focus. He recognized many of them from past missions, their names etched into his memory alongside memories of battles fought and lives saved. They were his family, just as much as was. And now, they were risking everything to bring him home. Behind them, more teams worked tirelessly to disable critical systems aboard the station. Engineers hacked into power grids, shutting down turrets and locking doors to slow the response. Medics tended to wounded wardens, patching up injuries with practiced efficiency. Every action was deliberate, every movement synchronized. It was a symphony of survival, orchestrated by years of trust and training. At one point, the group reached a junction where two corridors met, paused, consulting a holographic map projected from her wrist device. "This way," she said, pointing to the left. "The hangar bay is straight ahead. We'll rendezvous with the extraction pods there." But as they turned the corner, they were met with an unexpected obstacle. Commander himself, flanked by a squad of heavily armed soldiers. The leader stepped forward, his face twisted into a snarl. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's ours?" he growled, raising his weapon. "Not today." Raised her hand, signaling for her team to hold their fire. She took a step forward, her expression calm but firm. "We're not leaving without our people," she said evenly. "Stand aside or we'll make you." Laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the corridor. "Your people, that human stole something precious from us, something worth more than all of you combined." His gaze shifted to who growled softly in response. "That cub belongs to the Empire. You have no claim to it." Leo stepped forward, his voice steady despite the danger. "Doesn't belong to anyone, he's free, and so am I." For a moment the air between them crackled with tension. Then, without warning, fired his weapon, the blast narrowly missing Leo as he ducked behind cover. The wardens returned fire immediately, forcing the to retreat deeper into the corridor. The exchange was brief but brutal, leaving scorch marks on the walls and smoke hanging thick in the air. When the dust settled, motioned for her team to move forward. "Keep going," she ordered. "We don't have time for this." They pressed onward, navigating the labyrinthine corridors until they finally reached the hangar bay. The sight that greeted them was breathtaking. Dozens of boarding pods lined the walls, their engines humming softly as they prepared for departure. Beyond them, the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, dotted with stars and the silhouettes of waiting ships. "Go," shouted, ushering her team toward the nearest pod. One by one they climbed aboard, securing themselves tightly as the hatch sealed shut behind them. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Everyone knew they weren't safe yet, not until they were back aboard the fleet, but the hardest part was over. As the pod detached from the station and accelerated toward the waiting armada, Leo sat quietly in the corner, cradling in his lap. The cub nuzzled against him, letting out soft chirps that filled the cramped space with warmth. For the first time in days, Leo allowed himself to relax, his shoulders sagging slightly as exhaustion set in. Across from him watched silently, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, she offered him a small smile. "Welcome back," she said simply. Leo nodded, gratitude swelling in his chest. "Thanks for coming." "We always come," replied, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "That's what family does." Outside, the fleet began its withdrawal, retreating into fold space with the same precision and coordination that had marked their arrival. Behind them, Small remained intact but crippled, its defenses disabled and its crew humiliated. The message was clear. Humanity might be scattered and outnumbered, but they were far from weak. Their strength lay not in numbers or technology, but in unity and loyalty. The Iron Dawn, the lead ship of the fleet, the mood was subdued but triumphant. Pilots shared quiet words of relief, while engineers worked to repair minor damage sustained during the mission. In the medical bay, medics treated the wounded, their hands moving deftly as they stitched wounds and administered painkillers. In the command center, stood before a large viewport gazing out at the endless sea of stars. Beside her joined her, leaning against the console with a satisfied grin. "Mission accomplished," he said, crossing his arms. "Another day, another rescue." Chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Let's hope it stays that way. For now, though, we rest." As the fleet sailed deeper into the void, carrying its rescued members safely home, the galaxy took notice. News of the raid spread quickly, carried by whispers and rumors that painted the wardens as legends. Some dismissed the stories as exaggerations, others feared them as threats, but none could deny the truth at their core. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could still shine. And somewhere among the stars let out a playful bark, his silver fur glowing faintly under the artificial lights. Around him, laughter erupted, a sound born not of victory, but of connection. Connection between species, between strangers, between those who refused to give up. It was a bond stronger than any empire, fiercer than any predator, and brighter than any beacon. For Leo and the hundreds of others aboard the fleet, it was enough. Enough to remind them why they fought, why they endured, and why they would always come for each other. The Iron Dawn hummed softly as it drifted through the vast emptiness of space, its engines running at minimal power to conserve fuel. Inside, the mood was calm but reflective. After days of tension and danger, the Wardens had finally reached safe territory, a hidden asteroid field where the fleet could regroup and recover. For now, they were out of reach of and their relentless pursuit. In the ship's common area, Leo sat quietly on a bench, his back against the cool metal wall. Lay curled up beside him, his small body rising and falling with each gentle breath. The cub seemed content, his silvery fur shimmering faintly under the dim lights. Around them, crew members moved about, some sharing quiet conversations while others simply rested, their faces etched with exhaustion but also relief. Approached slowly, her boots making soft clinking sounds against the floor. She carried 2 steaming mugs of synth coffee, offering one to Leo as she sat down next to him. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said, her voice warm but firm. Leo accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping his hands around it to absorb its warmth. "I haven't," he admitted with a faint smile, "but I don't think I could sleep even if I tried." Nodded knowingly. "Give it time, your body will catch up eventually," she glanced at, who stirred slightly before settling again. "He seems better, stronger." "He is," Leo replied, stroking the cub's fur gently. "It's resilient, he'll be fine." There was a pause, filled only by the distant hum of the ship's systems. Finally, spoke again, her tone softer this time. "What happened out there, Leo? How did you end up with him?" Leo took a deep breath, staring into the mug as if searching for answers within its dark liquid. "It started on 7, he began, his voice low but steady. "I was doing routine supply runs when I heard rumors about a breeding facility. They were capturing apex cubs, stealing them from their mothers, and experimenting on them, trying to weaponize their biology." His jaw tightened, her anger barely concealed. "Monsters." Leo nodded grimly. "Yeah, so I went undercover, posing as a trader looking to buy exotic goods. It wasn't hard to find evidence once I got inside. What I saw, it was worse than I imagined. They were torturing those cubs, breaking them down piece by piece just to see how far they could push their limits." His voice cracked slightly and he paused to compose himself. "Was one of them. He was barely alive when I found him, starving, injured, scared. But there was still fight left in him. I couldn't leave him behind." "So you broke him out," finished, piecing together the rest of the story. "And then what? You knew they'd come after you." "I didn't have much choice," Leo admitted. "Once I needed to get as far away as possible. I thought I could stay ahead of them, keep moving until I found somewhere safe. But they're persistent, and I underestimated how far they'd go to get him back." Placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing lightly. "You did what you had to do. No one blames you for that." Leo looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude but also guilt. "Still feels like I put everyone in danger, if you hadn't shown up." "We always show up," interrupted firmly. "That's what we do, that's who we are. You didn't put us in danger, you reminded us why we exist, why we fight." Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply not just with Leo but with everyone nearby who had overheard. The wardens weren't just survivors, they were protectors. Their bond transcended bloodlines, species, and borders. Together, they formed something stronger than any empire or army. Meanwhile, aboard Smaw, Commander paced angrily in his quarters, replaying the events of the raid in his mind. Every step he took echoed loudly against the walls, matching the rhythm of his thoughts. How had it gone so wrong? How had a ragtag group of humans managed to infiltrate one of the most secure stations in the quadrant? "Sir," came a hesitant voice from the doorway. It was his usual confidence replaced by unease. "We've analyzed the data from the attack. Their ships, their old models, mostly civilian grade, but they work together perfectly, like a single organism." "Stop packing," turning to glare at. "A single organism," he repeated, his tone dripping with disdain. "Humans aren't capable of such coordination. They're selfish, disorganized cowards." Shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "Maybe before, but these ones, they're different. They act like they have nothing to lose and everything to gain." His expression darkened. "Different or not, they made a mistake coming here. Mark my words, we'll find them. And when we do, we'll make sure they regret it." But deep down wasn't so sure. There was something unsettling about the way the humans had operated, not with brute force but with precision and purpose. They hadn't destroyed the station or killed indiscriminately. Instead, they had targeted key systems, disabled defenses, and extracted their people without unnecessary casualties. It was almost honorable. And honor was something they understood all too well. Honor meant respect. Respect meant fear. Fear meant power. But this was something else entirely. Back aboard the Iron Dawn, preparations were for the fleet's next move. While the immediate threat had passed, everyone knew they wouldn't let this insult go unanswered. Intelligence officers pored over star charts, plotting potential ambush points and escape routes. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair damage sustained during the raid, ensuring every ship was ready for whatever came next. In the medical bay, Rachel tended to a wounded warden named Daniel, whose arm had been grazed by a plasma bolt during the battle. "Hold still," she instructed gently, applying a healing patch to the wound. "This will sting a little." Daniel winced but smiled weakly. "Thanks, Doc. Guess I owe you one." "No debts among family," Rachel replied, echoing a phrase often repeated among the wardens. "Just promise me you'll be more careful next time." As night fell, or rather, as the artificial lighting dimmed to simulate nighttime, the ship grew quieter. Crew members settled into bunks or gathered in small groups to share stories and laughter. In the mess hall, stood at the center of a lively discussion, recounting tales of past missions with exaggerated flair. His audience erupted into cheers and applause, momentarily forgetting the dangers they faced. Outside, the stars twinkled brightly, indifferent to the struggles of those who sailed beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, a comet streaked across the void, leaving a trail of light in its wake. It was a reminder of how vast and beautiful the universe could be, even amidst chaos. Later that evening, stood alone on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of space. Behind her, footsteps echoed softly, and she turned to see Leo approaching, trotting happily at his side. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, smiling slightly. "Not really," Leo admitted. "Too much on my mind." Nodded, gesturing for him to join her. Together they stood in silence, watching the stars twinkle like diamonds scattered across black velvet. After a while, Leo spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a difference, if any of this matters?" Considered the question carefully before answering. "Sometimes," she said honestly. "But then I remember moments like today, seeing everyone come together, risking everything for someone they care about. That's worth fighting for, worth living for." Leo looked down at who nuzzled against his leg affectionately. "Guess you're right," he said softly. "We may not change the galaxy overnight, but we can still protect what matters." "Exactly," agreed, her tone resolute. And as long as we stand together, no one can take that away from us. With that, they returned to the heart of the ship, where life continued to pulse vibrantly despite the challenges ahead. The wardens weren't naive. They knew the road would be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But they also knew they weren't alone. They had each other, and sometimes that was enough. Somewhere far beyond the reach of the Empire, humanity's silent promise echoed through the void. Never again would one of theirs be left behind. Not while 300 hearts beat as one.